I'm going to be completely honest at the start of this video and say that I do not know how to start, but I think what I'm going to say today has some value. I've been thinking a lot recently about the way things have panned out for me in the last few years. Now, for a bit of context, just quickly, I have gone from someone who really didn't like themselves very much about 2 years ago to someone who has a very positive relationship with themselves, and in the meantime has learned quite a lot. And this has brought me to some irritations with my former self. I seem to be finding myself looking back at times where I made a stupid decision, or I see a video of myself doing something I hated about myself. I'll just look back at who it was that I once was with a real irritation, and that irritation breeds from knowing that the me who speaks to you now would not do what I did then. Now, this is a very unique sort of regret, I suppose, because the reason why that is such an irritation for me is because I know that I wouldn't have acted or responded or whatever in the same way now. And with that irritation comes a kind of a wishing that I, who speaks to you now, could have been the one who dealt with that situation. Now, it's important to know, and I say this to you as I say it to myself, that the man I detest and wish that I could have traded places with as to respond to that situation appropriately is the man that is the reason why I am who I am. And what I wanted to get onto in today's video is that I think sometimes we're not ready to be the right thing. We're not ready to say the right thing, or do the right thing, or be the right person. Now, what I mean by that is the me who was fat, fucking useless, self-absorbed, narcissistic, lustful arsehole, to put it kindly, a few years ago, is the reason why I am who I am today. And that's such a unique way of thinking about things, and I'm going to say this with me as the example because I'm not articulate enough to say it in another way, and I hope you can just kind of take the value. Understanding that the me who I detest is the reason why I am the me that I love today is a very unique way of looking, and I urge a similar method to be taken if you can, because I think it's easy to look when you are a much fuller product or a better version of yourself, to look back at times when you weren't that and think, oh, for fuck's sake, why did I do that? And you can get yourself into some real uncomfortable loops with this. I have found myself in these loops, and it's why I wanted to talk to you today, is when you have that level of regret towards yourself, you go, why didn't I act differently? You have to recognise that you, at that point, you were simply not ready to respond in the way that you respond now. And an integral part of that is the reason why you now recognise how you would like to respond is because you responded in the wrong manner. You did the wrong thing, and by doing the wrong thing, you have eliminated that is the right thing to do. You now know, with that knowledge of, say for instance, I'll use a personal example. Not so long ago, someone pointed at me whilst I was sat in a chair because I was sat in their chair. And he clicked at me. And I stood up. And I didn't say anything. Now, that's been rattling around in my head for fucking months. Because I look at it now and I go, did you click at me to stand up? And I think now there is absolutely no chance that I would have allowed that to happen. I would have said, don't you fucking click at me. And I'm not trying to sound hard or anything there. I would not have stood for that. I don't have time for someone who does that. Now, in the moment, my thinking was I was at a party and I was a bit uncomfortable, so I wasn't thinking straight. I was too focused on other things rather than to be comfortable enough to stand up for myself. Now, with that thought, I have irritated myself beyond belief because I know that was the wrong thing to do. But how do I know that was the wrong thing to do? Well, because I did it. I was the one who did that thing. I was the one who has experienced that level of irritation about why did you do that? It was me. And without that understanding, would I have ever known that that was the wrong thing to do? Now, this calls to the fact that there is obvious value in failure, but more specifically than that, there's obvious value in genuine, or general rather, experience. I think so often in self-improvement, I think almost invariably, to be honest, I think anyone who chooses to improve is often being chased by something, and that something is often a version of themselves that they are not great fans of. It's so easy when you get better to look back at yourself with an apathy and a hatred almost of who it was that you were. And I urge you to consider that for all the faults of that person, for all the faults of who it was that you once were, that you could not be who it is that you are without them. It is that person who afforded you all the opportunities to recognise your mistakes. And with that, they kindly, I suppose, cancelled out some options. You know, if you are someone who was at one point overweight, watched too much porn, smoked weed too much, was too indulged and too invested in what women thought about him, didn't do any exercise, didn't read anything, whatever. If you were someone who was like that, you now know, as a result of being that person, that that's not something you want to do. And this calls to a kind of a more general version of what it means to improve. In that, even in your mistakes, even in your worst mistakes, your most shameful moments, there is a real value to that experience. And the reason that there's such a value to that experience is because it shows you who it is that at your core you truly are. You don't understand that, no, I'm not someone that wants to spend all their time on their phone. I'm not someone that wants to follow the crowd and just do what everyone else does. Until you've been that person. Until you've been someone, at least in the vicinity of that person. Understanding that that is not what you want to do as a result of that being what it is that you do. It's a very unique thing when you look back at yourself and notice change. Because if you're anything like me, it's quite simple to negate that or kind of bundle it, I suppose. You don't recognise, if you're 2 years down the line of improvement, you don't recognise how much time you have invested in yourself with that. You kind of just bundle it together and you forget the days. Now, I don't really know what you do about that, to be honest. I'm yet to learn what it is that you do about that. But what I do know is that there's so much work that we do for ourselves, be it our mistakes that push us in the right direction or our genuine efforts that do the same, that simply go unnoticed. And they go unnoticed because it takes so much to become someone that you once were not. A great fear of mine, until recently, was being caught by people that I considered, for all the most narcissistic reasons, not on my level. I felt like there was, I don't know, I suppose when you do a lot of work for yourself and when you put yourself in positions that you know are difficult, you can get a kind of chip on your shoulder and a resentment for the people that don't do it. And that is, I will say with absolute candidity, if that's a word, candid, honesty, absolute honesty, that's not the right way to be about things. There is this mentality that very simply arises in self-improvement of that there is not enough cake to go around. It's almost like if I improve and someone else improves at the same time, that my improvement is now less because they have also improved. If you're in this situation where you have this kind of almost vengeful winner's mentality, where it has to be you that does the best things, and it has to be you that is the one who's done the hard work and has been on that self-improvement journey, recognize that there is enough cake for everyone, and that your work and that what you do is not a measure of who you are versus someone else. The product of what you do, maybe. This is a precarious ground to stand on, and not one that I think I'm informed enough to stand on. That if you work harder on yourself and do more for the world than someone else does, are you better than that person? Well, by all measurements, yeah, you are. But what does it mean to be better than someone? Are you, can you put yourself in a position where you say you're better than someone? What does that mean? I'm not informed enough to talk about that, so I'm not going to talk about that. But I'm kind of deviating from the path here, but I think I'm just trying to get some thoughts out and speak out loud. It's important to remember that things happen in the specific ways and the specific timings that they happen for a very particular reason. I think we have to go through certain trials and tribulations and parts of our lives that set us up for the next time and the next portion of our lives. I think so often with self-improvement also, we kind of, as I've touched on there's a kind of chip on the shoulder sort of mentality when you start, that you're either running away from someone that you can't stand because of all the things that person created in your life. If you were someone who really made some terrible decisions and wasn't taking care of yourself, there's a very simple route to hatred for that version of yourself because of what it was that they did. But recognizing that that person has such a value for your life because it's you is immeasurably valuable. And what I'm touching on there, and I'm going in roundabout fucking circles, but I'm just trying to, I'm sharp. I'm just gonna say what I want to say. You are not the same person day to day. You're not the same person month to month, year to year, week to week. In that order. We are such different versions of ourselves, and if you put it into the most basic forms, as a 20-year-old, am I the same as when I was 10? No, of course not. Am I the same as when I was 0? No, of course not. I didn't have a beard. And that angle and that measure can be used for pretty much every portion of your life. If you're someone who's doing things for yourself, it's reasonably likely that in 2 months' time, you're going to know quite a lot more than what it is that you know now, because that's just kind of the way it goes. And with this angle, I suppose you can kind of push this angle into one of empathy, that you only know what you know now as a result of what you once did not know. You can't go back and change how it was that you were. And if you were to do that, you wouldn't be who it is that you are. You wouldn't be able to recognise that, for fuck's sake, why did I do the things that I did without having done them? That was the catalyst so often that pushes people to do other things, is a culmination of a number of these experiences. When so many times you do the wrong thing, or you say the wrong thing, or you act in a specific way, or your morals are a certain way, over a period of time of doing things the wrong way, you learn to do it the right way, and that is the catalyst. It's the instigator of change so often. And as I say, I don't know whether many people experience this as well. I suppose I hope not. I hope no one understands what it is that I'm saying. But if you find yourself in a position where you look back at who it was you once were with a hatred or an irritation Just try and let go of that, because it's no longer required. Once you recognise that you are in a stage where you can look back at your former self and think, wow, you and I are not the same person, take that for the win that it is, and don't take it any further than that. Don't worry about the resentments or the angers or the irritations, because they're not valuable. There's nothing you can do about that. What you can do is congratulate yourself and recognise that you are now in a position where you can look back at that space in time with an understanding that you are now further on than then. Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to add another little interesting point, just to see if anyone would be interested in talking about this. Is I was at training today with my jiu-jitsu guy, fucking legend, and he's done it for 36 years. He's been doing it since he was 3. So he's basically done jiu-jitsu longer than I've even been alive. And I came to think, of course, I will caveat this as to not sound like an arrogant twat, with he has had an entire lifetime's worth of understanding of one of the most critical components of what it means to be happy, in my opinion, in discipline and understand, putting yourself towards something. He's had that for his entire life. And of course, he's got the actual asset of being someone who is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. But he and I come from very, very different angles on this, because of course, and I will caveat because my ego is too fragile not to, I'm nowhere near as good as him. Of course I'm not. But I have the unique angle of the fact that I've learned from not knowing. I understand what it means to not know how to do jiu-jitsu, and I understand what it means to learn some jiu-jitsu, and I've bridged that gap between, or that within has such anxiety and discomfort and fear. I've been able to bridge that gap, and it was something I spoke about a while ago, was that making mistakes and having those times in your life affords you the understanding of being able to overcome that thing. The person who doesn't have stage fright that goes on stage is not going to get the same "fuck yes, I did it" buzz as the person who's terrified to go on stage and does it anyway. I speak from experience on that. If you're scared of doing something and you do it, you get a significant boost over someone who's just not scared of doing it. And I was thinking about this in relation to childcare and bringing up a child. Now, I have no understanding of this at all. I speak entirely hypothetically. But would you provide your child with, say you have an 8-year-old child, do you get them to understand what it means to be disciplined before they need to express that or use that? Or do you let them fail, find difficulty, and get to a stage where they're so exhausted and tired of being the person that they are that they choose to change? Do you let someone find it out for themselves and work through the pain? Now, my inclination is, yeah, you do. I think you just... I'm not sure whether it's the right thing to armour someone or to prepare someone without them experiencing it themselves. There was a good friend of mine who I thought recently about, and this sounds terrible, but I'm going to say the way that I feel. I am much further along the road of understanding who it is that I am as a person, and I can see so many resemblances in myself or who I once was to my friend. I can see myself in him. I feel like I understand why he does the things that he does. I've been in the exact same position and I really understand it. And with that, I understand how to get out of it. Now, one side of me thinks, well, with that understanding, pay that forth, tell him, because then he can do it. But then the other side of me that realises is if you don't experience something yourself, it doesn't yield the same value. You don't have the same lesson as a result of that. And I genuinely believe that. I think if you experience something firsthand and you understand, say you're someone who has a genuine difficulty with anxiety. Let's categorize it just for ease. You have a real difficulty with anxiety that leads you to have an intense requirement and desire and lust for female attention. Now, if you're someone that's like that, and someone else knows what it's like to be like that, they can tell you all the things and they can show you the way. But if you don't know, if you haven't got to that stage where you think, oh, for fuck's sake, why have I got such why do I care about this so much? If you haven't got to that stage yet, then the lesson that you take from that's not going to be the same, because you haven't fully comprehended the pain of the feeling. And I suppose this, to bring this all together in the end, is what I'm saying about whether we're ready to experience things. I think so often we have to get to a kind of breaking point or a pain threshold that we just think, do you know what? Fuck this. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not being this way anymore. I'm not being this person anymore. I think we have to get to that stage before we genuinely see the value in the lesson. And with that, I think I'm good. If you are here for this video and you've seen any of this video at all, if you've seen this now, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. If you've seen any of this video at all, I'll just send thank you for just into the ether. Have a good evening. Take care of yourselves. Love you all. All the rest of it. Take care. Love you. Turn off.